sometimes God's presence can just be something as simple as being in a really chaotic situation, and just you have absolutely no reason why, because there should be no reason why you have a sense of peace or a sense of joy or a sense of happiness, and yet it's all of a sudden like, whoa.
Are you filming?
I am.
Okay. So, what exactly are we doing again as our topic?
Here, I'll start it off, I suppose. Here. Film me.
Film me.
No, it's not clean back there.
You'll be okay. All right. Hi, everyone out there on YouTube, and hello, everyone who's here today. Today.
That was special.
Don't laugh, John.
Today we're talking about, we're just talking about how God has been real in our lives, what He's done, how He's revealed Himself to us, and I suppose I'll just begin by saying that I became a Christian watching some online videos. God reached me through someone's videos, and ever since I've had a real passion for video-based evangelism, and so that's why I began this little YouTube channel where we get to talk about the things of faith and about our faith in Christ. So with that being said, I'm going to turn the camera on you guys, and you can take it from there.
For me, I've just kind of had, I'll ask God for opportunities in my life. And so when, like, I'll just make that kind of a constant prayer, like, I'll forget for long extended periods, and then I'll think, oh yeah, I should be asking God for opportunities to do something. And then I'll start praying for opportunities again. And then all these things will start popping up in my life where I can be a witness to people, or be like to help somebody in their Christianity, or give somebody an answer for something. And just it seems when I depend on God to lead the direction of my life, I get all these different opportunities to do things for Him. So like, I'll go on and on just living life for myself, doing what I want to do, doing like what I want to do for fun, trying to do well in school, just living like a normal person. Then all of a sudden I'll say like, oh yeah, God, direct me in what you want me to do. Lead me into like bringing your glory. And then I'll have like somebody come along and say, oh, why don't you start an apologetic small group? I'd love that. And then I get 20 kids coming every week or something like that. It just seems like once I remind myself, oh God, I want what you want, then just He floods me with opportunities.
For me, there's so many times in my life where life gets so busy and I'm not making time for God the way that I should be making time for God. And then all of a sudden, I feel so drained or emotionally just exhausted. And I'll realize, like, the reason that this is happening is because I haven't been being consistent with God, and I haven't been spending my time with God. And so I'll go and I'll like make that time, and I'll lock my door in res, and I'll put a note on the door to my roommate saying like I'm spending time with God, and I'll just really invite Him into my presence. And I find that in those moments when I really make time for God and I sit in His presence and I open up the Word of God, like, and hear His voice, that's when I hear it so strongly. It's not so much in my day-to-day things, even though there's been times where like Joanne and I will be talking in the stairwell, or Max and I will be talking in the cat, and I'll hear God's voice through them. But like for me, when I hear God's voice the most is when I make those times for just God and I to be intimate and alone, and I can feel Him when I'm reading His Word. So that's when He reveals Himself to me.
We say this one thing that we say a lot. It's being in God's presence, and it's said so many times in the Bible that we almost take it for granted, I think. But what does it actually mean that we can recognize, hey, I'm in God's presence now? Like, is there a feeling to it, or something that you have to acknowledge with your mind, or something that you have to like something you feel, or like what is it? A sense, an emotion, and it might be different things for different people.
For me, it's always been, well, one of my struggles is I'm neurotic about all of my decisions. I can never just settle on one choice. I will think it through like a million times. And I remember over the last 2 years or so, it became clear to me that when God speaks, it's when I know that God's speaking to me, when I know for certain that this choice that pops into my head is for dead certain the one that I want. Like at one point, a friend of mine left the church that we were both going to. He was a mentor of mine, so I was, going to follow him to another church. And we both worked with the youth in the church. And I remember going to that church with him one Sunday, and I left. And on the way back home, I was walking home, and I just knew that God had said, no, you're not supposed to be going to that church. You're staying where you are. I have work for you. And normally I would have spent like the rest of that week just going, do I go to that church? Do I not go to that church? Balancing the pros and cons. But like within 5 minutes of leaving the church, I knew, no, God was like, nope, you're going there. So that's how it is for me. I think it's just absolute certainty.
So for you, it's like God brings you clarity of like thought and decision, and He takes something that normally is a struggle for you and manipulates it beyond what you could have done yourself.
Yep, exactly.
So it's something external to you.
Mm-hmm.
I think even sometimes God's presence can just be something as simple as being in a really chaotic situation. And just you have absolutely no reason why, because there should be no reason why you have a sense of peace or a sense of joy or a sense of happiness. And yet it's all of a sudden like, whoa.
Yeah.
I'm in the middle of all this chaos, and why in the world am I at peace? Or why in the world am I so happy in the midst of every single thing that seems to be going wrong in my life?
Yeah.
Like, why is this how it is? Or like you said, sitting reading your Bible, and all of a sudden you just feel like you've just been slapped in the face. And you just, you feel like your eyes have been opened to something, or that you feel something that wasn't there before. Or it's even really hard to describe sometimes, but you just know beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is something that's really different. And you can feel it, and it's just almost overwhelming sometimes.
See, I feel the presence of God sometimes, and it's not something that is easily to describe, because it's not a feeling. Like, it's more than a feeling. Like, you can just feel the presence, and it's very thick, and it's very it's very much around you. And I remember the other, like maybe a week ago, we were at Newfie Chapel, and I felt the presence of God all around me, and I was at peace in a circumstance in my life that I haven't been at peace with for a long time, and where people around me are like, how are you going through this in your life where you should be breaking down and crying right now and shouldn't be able to talk, you shouldn't be able to work your way through the days, and yet God has given me so much joy and so much peace. And like, I sat there in Newfie Chapel and was just like, God, you are so enough. Like, I don't need anything else in this world other than you, because you are enough. You will sustain me, you'll give me the food I need, you'll give me like the money that I need to get through school, the money that I need to live. You're going to provide it. And your love is enough to sustain me, even if I don't have a significant other, even if I don't have those friendships in my life that I thought that I needed so badly. God is saying, I will sustain you. I am enough. And like, that was a time when I felt God's presence so thick around me. And I know, like, my non-Christian friends, they'll say to me, well, that's just going on in your head. That's not really God's presence. That's just you making this great big emotional experience out of worship. But like, I think when you are in the presence of God, it's not that feeling. And so many people dumb it down to, I feel the presence of God. That's just it. But it's so much more than that. Like, it's greater. It's thicker.
I'd like to speak to that. Yeah, we were talking about in my Jewish philosophy class today that the empiricists, when they're talking about objectively analyzing people's experience with God, that they want to just reduce religious experience to a feeling and saying that it's just going on in your mind. And he said that God's presence, the guy speaking, he's not a Christian, but he's a Jewish man, and he says what comes with God and his presence is a epistemic certainty that God is speaking to you. God won't reveal anything to you unless he's going to make you sure that it's him. Otherwise, God's wasting his time. I mean, he knows everything anyways, so why would he play games with you, right? When God has revealed himself to me, there's never been a question that it's been him. And I'm going to talk about inner transformation of my own person that I know is of God, and I'll give you an example. Before I became a Christian, I was an extremely depressed person, very dark in my attitudes and whatnot. Suicide was a constant struggle for me, at least thinking suicidal thoughts. And then I had a girlfriend back in high school who sort of brought me out of it. She was my idol, essentially. I thought about her and nothing else for my entire time with her. And then once we broke up, I was so obsessed with her that I spent the next 4 years sort of mourning over her. And total obsession, like really ridiculous, disproportionate affection for her. Anyways, the point was, I became a Christian then. And then I had another girlfriend after, who I think I felt even stronger about after the fact. And then she broke up with me in the exact same way that this other one did, but I had a peace about it. I had a newfound way of dealing with it, and I've never... The absolute transformation of person, my resource in that feeling of brokenheartedness and despair was replaced with a substantial relationship with another, which was God, which sustained me through that. And if that was just an idea in my mind, if it wasn't something I was so sure of that God had made me so certain of, I would have been no different. God literally transformed my very person to be able to deal with a situation that I'd previously been in and now put in it again. I was more than an overcomer in Christ. The Scripture says that is what God makes us. He makes us more than overcomers. And so my very nature was transformed, and I can look at myself objectively, seeing how I was before I was a Christian and how I was after, and I dealt with that situation so much differently. And I can only thank God for what he had done to me, because it was my Christian faith and God's presence with me through that situation that utterly transformed my way of dealing with things. That's one example of many.
And what is striking about that, again, is that the whole situation being resolved like that for you in your inner transformation came from the fact that God was an exterior agent. Not that he was a feeling that you were just experiencing. It's like, oh, it's just a feeling that I'm having in myself. But it was something other than you interacting with you and doing something to you, like doing a work on your heart, changing you. And it wasn't like, and we know what we're talking about. It's not something, oh, it's just like my feelings are doing this to me, or my hormones are imbalanced, or some weird thing like that. It was an exterior agent, an intelligent being, another that you could have a relationship with, working on you and interacting with you. And then and that's what God's presence means. It means that literally there is someone else next to you, or with you, or inside of you, or around you, or speaking to you, or communicating with you, or touching you. It's the experience of this other. And it's not just an experience of something you've fabricated or something you've wished for. And that's another thing. You were talking about the empiricists, and saying that everything that you need to, that you can know is by sense experience, and you have to have solid facts and, evidence for things and stuff like that. I just forgot where I was going with that.
It's okay, take your time. I just wanted to mention, I can mention this off camera, but the fact, if God was just an idea or a feeling, ideas and feelings, they kind of waver. Mm-hmm. They come and they go. But God was a continuous, and he remains to be a continuous resource who I can go to and is faithful. Mm-hmm. Yes. I can think of no other idea in my mind that has been, if it's just an idea, I can think of none that has been so profoundly altering in my life and so continuously faithful every time I turn to it.
Mm-hmm. I just got back on track because of what you said.
There you go.
And it's because the idea of God is a constant that you can continue going to, and he remains the same. It's not just something that changes with your desires. Some people will say that the idea of God is just our wishful thinking for some imaginary friend who's going to get us through, who's always going to be there for us, and a cosmic teddy bear that's invisible in the sky that we can hug whenever we need, right? You guys know Colin Owen, our chapel coordinator, right? I was talking to him sometime last year, and Actually, no, I think it was in the fall. Anyhow, I was talking to him about like worship leading and stuff, and the worship leader's job is to lead people into God's presence and like make the connection, right? And he said this thing to me that was really profound. He said, a lot of worship leaders carelessly say things like, "God, we invite you into this place, or we want your presence to be here with us," right? And the way he put this was, yeah, you want that to be what happens in worship, but you don't just carelessly and flippantly say that, because when God is present in the room with you, like specifically he is revealing himself there and he's near everybody, all of your sins, all of your bad attitudes, all of your grudges and mistakes and all those things are laid bare before him. And there's nothing you can do to hide it. It's there, and everything that's bad about you is there. And people can say that God is an imaginary friend that we want to have there, that we can have him help us and stuff. But the thing is, if I was to construct my ideal imaginary friend, he wouldn't be, an objective judge who could see everything that was wrong with me and be right about it every time.
Yeah, that happened to me in a service before I started coming here. I remember everybody was praying that prayer. Like, be here with us, make your presence known. And I remember sitting in the corner, and pretty much everything that I was dealing with, God just says, okay, now you're going to deal with this. And he just laid it out for me. It was like three major things that I was struggling with, and he was just like, there it is. Now you got to do something about it. And I was just like, oh, I knew a couple of them, but there was one of them I was just like, I thought I dealt with that. And that I honestly don't think that could possibly be from me. Like I said, I thought I dealt with it. The fact that he brought it up and said, no, you haven't.
Yeah, like you guys are saying how some people see God as the fluffy teddy bear that you hug, that it's just like you're creating in your mind to deal with your problems. So basically what they're saying is God's a placebo. And you're making this placebo, and the reason it works is because you believe it works. Well, then you have stories like Sean's, where it's just complete life and character transformation, completely deals with problems differently. Well, if God's a placebo, he's like way more effective than any placebo on record. They've done tests to show to what point a placebo works. And they've pointed out like different things like Scientology. They've shown that Scientology things either work as well or not as well as placebos, just because it only works up to a certain point. If God works, and they think God is some sort of placebo, why does something like Alcoholics Anonymous, who worked on a Christian faith-based idea, work so much drastically better than any type of secular program? Why does a situation like you guys are describing, where you're in a worship service and you pray for God to do something for you, rather than just feeling a euphoric feeling like, oh, that worked, I feel better about myself now, why do things pop up in your mind that you don't want to deal with? Yeah. Why would a placebo do something that is going to be unpleasant for you? Or difficult for you, but in the long run, be healthy. Like if you go to a psychiatrist, they're not going to just tell you all the things you want to hear to try and make you feel better. But that's what you would want them to do. They're going to actually make you deal with the hard things. So if God's just made up and it's a placebo for you, why are these things happening?
I have a testimony to that effect. At the beginning of this year, I was sitting in a dorm event, and we were supposed to write a letter to God, or a letter to ourselves for like the new year or whatever, and talk to God about the things that we wanted him to work on. And I sat in that room, and at that point in my life, I was dating someone. I felt like I had it all together, but then at the same time, I was so insecure as a person, and I knew I had a lot of internal things that I wasn't letting anyone see from the outside. And so I poured myself into this letter, and I wrote all of my insecurities down. I wrote all the things in my life that I was not happy with, and I said, God, I'm giving you myself right now, complete surrender, and I want you to be in control of the semester, and I want you to teach me what you have to teach me. And I sealed the letter, and I put it away, and I gave it to my RA, and they gave it back to me. But anyway, from the moment I wrote that letter to God, to right now, God has done like such an overhaul on my life. Like everything has changed, and he's taken a lot away from me, and he's taken the relationship that I found so much security in and so much of my worth and identity in. He's taken friendships that were not honoring or edifying, and he's redefined my relationship with my parents. He's brought people into my life that I needed to be in my life, and like I look back to September, and it's February now, and I look back to September and I think who I was then and the insecurities that I had then, and how God has just done an overhaul on my life. If God was just a placebo like you were talking about, I wouldn't be the changed person that I am right now. I wouldn't be sitting here able to hold myself together now that I'm not in that relationship, now that those best friends in my life that I put so much of my worth and security in were taken away. I wouldn't be able to do that, but because of the sustaining power of God in my life, and because of the peace that passes all understanding that is written in His Word, because of that, I am able to sustain through all of that, because God has gotten me through it, and He's taught me so much through it, and brought me to where I am, and redefined my worth and my call because of it.
It's interesting how you, Max, were saying the whole idea about worship leaders kind of invite God into our presence, but the thing that just kind of clicked in my brain is, Narnia, everyone knows Narnia. In The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, in the movie and in the books too, they talk about, how Aslan, the lion, is good. He's not safe, but he's good. And how that phrase rings true with God. The whole idea that if you invite God's presence into a room, you better be shaking in your boots, because some big stuff is going to happen. And if you invite, or if you give over things to God, if you're like, what, God, like this in my life, I need you to do an overhaul. I need you to just refurbish everything. If you do that, then you can't do that and just kind of and walk away, because God's going to take you to that, and it's not going to be safe. I mean, I'm sure, I know in my life, and I'm sure in your life the same thing, like you didn't go through like laughing and joking around throughout like God doing that huge overhaul in your life. Like it was probably a time where you wrestled with yourself, where you wrestled with God, and you're like, God, like why are you doing this? How can you do this? And this is everything to me. And the same thing with me, like, God, I don't want to have to deal with these things. I don't want to have to become vulnerable with people, because when I do that, it leaves me open to be hurt, and no one wants to be hurt. Like that's just who we are as humans. And yet at the same time, God is so good, despite the fact that He's not safe. And I think so often people think of God, and the whole concept of God is someone who's maybe like a really nice old grandfather who just gives you whatever you want, or He's someone who sits up in heaven and judges us really harshly and like damns us all to hell or stuff like that. But the fact that God cares about us so much that He's willing to go through life with us, and He's willing to do that overhaul while walking step by step with us and often carrying us as He does that huge overhaul in our lives.
It's funny that you say God isn't safe, because as you were saying that, I was reminded, somebody once told me that be careful when you ask God to humble you. Mm-hmm. And I thought like, oh, that's weird. And then they kind of explained it like, imagine like asking God for righteousness or something. That's easier. It's just to like work on your lifestyle choices. For God to humble you, that means you have to have your pride stripped away from you. And so I remember thinking about this and kind of pondering it for a while, and think to myself, you know what, I got a little bit too much pride. I think I'm actually gonna try this. And so I realized what I was doing. I said like, God, could you humble me? Like, make me a more humble person. And it was like, not even a week later, I was in film school at the time, and so I had been nominated for 6 awards at this film thing, and I was like so sure I was gonna win this thing. And like I brought my girlfriend who I was dating at the time. I brought like my best friend and his girlfriend, and I'm like so sure. Me and my buddy that worked on the one project were joking around about how we got this thing nailed. We're totally gonna win it. I was talking to people thinking, oh yeah, I'm gonna win at least 2. And so the whole time I got all this pride built up about it, and then I don't win anything, and I feel like such an idiot afterwards. And so like, and looking back, like I should have won like a few of them. Like I did a good job, but I didn't win any of them. And so like it was even to the point that the person on the podium made a joke about how I was obviously going to win it. And then I didn't. It was kind of like, oh, congratulations, other person, And so I didn't win any of them. And so I'm going home. I was actually like mad, and looking back, it was so stupid and childish. The whole drive home, I drove my girlfriend and my best friend and his girlfriend home. It was like a 20-minute drive, and the whole time it was like dead silent because everybody could tell how mad I was. So it's like all this pride in me, and it just got totally like flushed down the toilet. And it was like a few days later, I was still stewed about it for a few days, and I kind of realized, wow, you actually did that, God. Like, I deserve to get that, and you made it so I didn't get it, just so you could like test my pride and make me swallow my pride a little bit, you know. So it's funny that you said God isn't safe, and that's totally true.
Well, I always say to everybody that like I'm the most stubborn person ever, because I kind of am. And once I get on something, I can be so stubborn with it. And before, I guess I would say that I was a true Christian, because I grew up in a Christian home, and my parents are Christians, and my sisters are Christians. Before I can say that my life actually changed for what I believe in, I was a very angry and prideful and arrogant person. And I had a lot of stuff happen to me in high school. Well, not actually directly to me, but for me, I'm a really caring person. Like, I care about the people that I love, and I'll do anything for them, but a lot of stuff started to happen to them that I had no control over. Like, one person really close to me got schizophrenia, was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Another person was hospitalized for depression and suicide and bulimia. And I had no control over the situations, and I always liked the fact that I had control in my life. And those situations made me realize how scary it is to really be vulnerable with people, and how quickly everything you're secure in can be taken away. And so in those situations, God was kind of trying to pull me closer to Him, but I kept resisting, because I knew if I was to become closer to God, then I would have to be completely vulnerable to God. And that wasn't something I was willing to do. So for a really long time, I guess I kind of pushed God away, but like pretending that I had Him near. So like I'd say the classic things like, oh, I know God's in control and I know everything's going to be fine, but like really I couldn't see how it was going to be fine. And one weekend I went on this retreat with my friends, and me and my girlfriends ended up sitting in the bathroom all night talking. And because I'm really stubborn, if I don't want to say something, I won't say it. And it took them until 4 in the morning, from 9 until 4 in the morning, to get me to spill. So exhaustion probably played in part of that. But I told them everything that was going on in my life, because like I didn't tell anybody about like the person with schizophrenia or the depression or anything that anybody was going through, because I wanted to deal with it on my own, because that meant I would have that control over that aspect of my life. And in telling them, I came to the point when I said, like, I know who God is, and I know everything you guys are going to say to me right now about like how I should trust in God and have faith in God. Like, I know all that you're going to say to me, because my dad was a pastor's kid, so like I've heard it all before. I was always the kid in Sunday school to like have my hand up first and answer all the questions. So I was like, just don't say anything, because right now I'm to the point where I know that God exists, but I don't care to have Him in my life. And I came to that point, and then it made me really realize, like, is that where I want my life to go? So I spent a summer in Quebec, and I saw how my life could be without God, and I saw how my life could be with God. So like I saw that if I had God in my life, how peaceful my life could be, how even though I wouldn't have control, there would still be control over every situation, and a control that is way more stronger and way more powerful and way more enjoyable than any control that I could ever have. And so I really had to lay my life out and be vulnerable to God, and it's a really difficult thing to do, and give up control of my life, and that's an extremely difficult thing to do. But through all of that, I just saw God work in my life, and how He wouldn't let me get away from Him, no matter how hard I tried, because I could run away as fast as I could, but He's always a step ahead of me, prepared to jump in front of me and make me trip and fall and then pick me up again. But I really saw, after I gave up my life to God, a transformation in my relationships with my family. because me and my family would argue constantly, and like with my words when I'm angry, that's what I use. Like I don't fight physically, but with my words I can be really quick and I can be really mean and harsh. But like when I gave up my life to God, it really held back on a lot of that stuff, and it really changed the way that I saw my family. And my mom and I couldn't talk to her about anything, and if we tried to talk about anything, it would just be arguing. But now she's like one of my best friends, and it sounds all like fairy tale and la-di-da, because I still definitely argue, and it's still something I definitely struggle with, and I constantly have to watch my tongue. But really, like, the transformation that I've seen in my life from allowing myself to be vulnerable to God and allowing myself to give up that control, even though I still have to give up control each day, has been really a journey that I think that, like, as hard as it may be, it is definitely worth it, and there's nothing I would change about it. And like all that bad stuff that happened, as awful as it is, I don't think I would change any of it for the fact that it can really show how God is working in the world. And yeah.
So where you saw God working in your life was problems that you needed to deal with, that you thought you needed to deal with on your own. And you didn't want outside help and you wanted to do it your way.
Yeah.
But there was this inescapable, this is the way you need to do it, and I'm going to get you to do it this way because I care about you thing. And it was someone else doing that. And it was God doing that. And you couldn't get away from what he was trying to do. And you just knew that that's what was going on. I think I'm seeing like there's a common thread with all of this. The things we believe about God as Christians, that he's like all-knowing and like omnibenevolent, he's always looking out for people's like best interests, and he's like all-powerful and he's omnipresent and all these things. Like God's a perfect being. Like everything about him is as optimal and maximal as it can be. It's full to the top. There's nothing greater than him. You know, philosophy majors, Anselm's greatest conceivable being. He's like the thing. He's the best, and he's all perfection. One of the things that we sing all the time is another thing that we take for granted, I think, is when we sing that God's holy, and I think that comes up in pretty much every song ever, and we use it, but when we think about God as being holy, he's perfect. He knows better than you. He can sort out the situation better than you. He's smarter than you. He's got it under control, and if you think that your life is figured out and you have control of what you're doing and you know what's best for yourself, you're probably mistaken, or at least you can't measure up to what God knows.
See, taking that point, I think it's crazy that when you read stuff like Freud talking about how, you know, Christianity is just the opiate of the masses, where it's just this comfortable thing that we have that we can just, you know, look to forget about everything. That's completely backwards to what we actually see. Like, what rational mind puts, you know, builds up this teddy bear who forces us to deal with stuff that we don't want to deal with? And it's not like this is happy times. It's not like, oh yay, I'm going to deal with this today. No, this hurts like crazy. You know, you don't want to deal with this stuff. There's a reason why we bury it. And yet, here's God saying, you know, this is what we're dealing with today. And you're just like, ow. Like, yeah.
You look throughout history, too, and even just being in, I have a class, The World of the Early Christians, and just looking at how many people willingly gave up their lives. And they had a choice to get out of it. They could pay off the jail guard, they could buy the certificate, they could do the sacrifice, like whatever, and they would get out of it. And yet they willingly chose to be mauled by lions. I'm sorry, if I had the choice, I might pay $50 to buy the certificate in getting mauled by lions, other than getting mauled by lions. But like, what type of passion, what type of being, what type of religion takes you to the point where it's do and or die? Like what? God just seems so powerful and so inescapable and so loving and so just everything, that he is our all. It seems that it can't be anything else. If I tried to go for anything else, if I tried to live how I want to live, if I try to live how everyone else wants me to live, it's not going to work. I'm not going to get the same amount of just satisfaction of living that I do now. It's going to be tough. But to know that just the joy and hope that is in me is just unexplainable.
I'd like to say a few words.
Ben, can I?
Yeah, you're next. Yeah, speaking about just Christianity and being vulnerable and taking us to where we're uncomfortable, I mean, the fact that I make YouTube videos, I mean, I put my face out there, and I have received flack for it, death threats to my house and family, and it's certainly never, not that there hasn't been good times, but there's been a lot of bad times, but I wouldn't give it up. Like, I wouldn't, if I had to choose between not having God and having a good life, or having God and having a bad life, I'll choose God all the way, and all the bad stuff that comes with it. So there's a vulnerability in being a Christian, because we live in an age where everyone sort of calls us hypocrites, or delusional, or anyways, yeah, if you put yourself out there and say you're a Christian, you're going to you open yourself up to criticism, just by nature of how people in today's culture feel about the church and whatnot. So on top of that, I make myself a public figure, and you guys, actually, just by participating here, you also have opened yourself up to some level of exposure and vulnerability. And I imagine you do so only because you also believe that there is a God who is worth testifying to, regardless of the consequences. And that's why we do what we do. As far as making my personal life better, I lost all my friends when I became a Christian. And as soon, like, I remember that just the night before, I wasn't a Christian, now the night after I am, and they come over and, you know, hey, let's do drugs, let's go to the party. I'm like, you know what, guys? I'd like to tell you about the moon and why it can't be millions of years old, because I think this proves a young Earth, which proves there's a God. And all of a sudden they're like, okay, we're going to go to the bar and we'll see you later. And boom, never heard from them again. These were my friends from high school. And within a week of becoming a Christian, I realized I was going to lose all my friends, and I did. But that didn't mean for a moment I questioned my Christianity or that God was real. I just realized that was part of the process. It doesn't make life easier. And the fact that my parents are Jewish on both sides, they wanted to disown me. So there's been, and my siblings calling me idiots, and my extended family, they won't even look at me or invite me over to birthday parties anymore. Like, it's come with a price. You know, Christ told us to count the cost. And I get into arguments all the time with my parents, so I'm not trying to discourage the audience from becoming a Christian, although it sounds like death threats and dividing the family and all that. But I'll tell you the truth. It is the most rewarding on one level, but again, just talking about inner transformation. Before I became a Christian, I hadn't told my mom or my dad that I had loved them for years. Like, I couldn't bring myself to do it, and now it's like, I no problem saying it, either publicly or to them. Christ has made me a loving person. He's given me love, and now I can express that openly to others and to them. So I can't think of anything greater. Love is the greatest of them all, of the virtues, and that is definitely something God has given me. And that's definitely real. To take someone who can't even tell their parents that they love them, and being able to, I weep with tears at night because I have that love for them, and because they're not saved, and I have that burden for them. Anyways, so that's just a little bit about me.
Christianity is not for the faint of heart.
Yeah,
God
not
never
for-
promises that it's going to be. God never promises that it's going to be easy. He just says that he'll be with you even when it's not easy. And like my parents, they were missionaries with Muslims, and for years and years nothing was happening. And finally, one person gave their life to Christ, and one Muslim gave his life to Christ. And after that, his family disowned them. They had a funeral for him, and but slowly, because of that one man that took the step of faith to become a Christian, others started becoming Christians too, because they knew that even though they wouldn't have their extended family's approval and they would be disowned, they knew that they were joining a greater family, a greater family that would support them and love on them. And the thing is, coming to Tyndale and living at Tyndale has shown me just how great and vast this family is, and how even though we can sit around in the circle and hear all the different opinions of theology and all these different different backgrounds that we all come with, we are still brothers and sisters in Christ. And how amazing that is to enter that family and to know that you are supported globally by your brothers and sisters in Christ, let alone by the creator of the world itself. So, like you said, like faith is not for the faint of heart. It's not promised to be easy, but God says that He is going to be with us now that we've joined that family. So that's an amazing testimony that you have.
Give your all to Jesus.